Greetings and welcome to the Upper Pen Podcast. My name is Dakota Van Linden, and today I'm speaking with Ryan Rimmel, author of the Noobtown series. Ryan's Noobtown series follows Jim, a father and husband who died in a car accident. As with most lit RPG, this calamity has led him to a new world, but uniquely, Joe is ultimately accompanied by a demon named Shart, who is trying to steal Jim's soul, and a war badger named Badgelor, who wants revenge. Well, that and to laugh at Jim's ridiculous mistakes. Ryan's work is funny and engaging as Jim is learning about his new home. Ryan, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
So tell me how you got started with Noobtown.
Well, let's see here. When I turned 40, I decided I was going to write a book because I had not ever written a book before. And at that point, I started writing, and I decided it was absolutely terrible, and I put it down and ignored it for a good 3 months. I wrote the entire first book of Noobtown in 30 days.
What?
Because it was a work of passion, 90,000 words in 30 days. The story just fell out of me. It wasn't like I was thinking about it for 6 months beforehand. But anyway, I looked at it, the first draft of it at least, and it was terrible. And I decided to put it up and ignore it. And then my beautiful wife came and looked at it and said, "This is terrible, but I can make it better." And she helped me with it, and we rewrote a lot of it. And a few months after that, it was actually something palatable. And I figured I would release it. I had my cover artist backed out, and I said, heck with it, I'm going to release it. And everything else went bad, and I said, heck with it, I'm going to release it. And so if you've seen the original cover for my first book, it was absolutely terrible. And I did that, and it actually sold pretty well, and I had a lot of people who liked it. And so I decided I'd just keep going, and I'm up to almost finished with book 5 now.
So one of the things that I really love about Noobtown is Jim is older. He's an older protagonist, which is not very common for the lit RPG genre right now. Most of them are in their 20s, their early 30s, and they're in their prime, and they've never really had that much difficult life experience. But Jim is older. He's a retiree. He has a wife, some kids. So what about making him older was appealing to you?
Well, it was my first book, and my understanding is your first protagonist should always be based on you. And Jim is about my age. He's a little bit younger than or a little bit older than I am. And he's got a similar life experience to me. So I was just using that as a base because it's easier to draw from. Plus, all the other books I'd read had 20-year-old protagonists, and I figured that was done to death.
That's very true. I mean, I definitely understand why you'd have a young protagonist, but Jim stands out in that he's a little bit older and he doesn't really care so much. And usually his thoughts are, "Oh, I wish my wife was here."
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, he was very much looking forward to retirement. If he had an option between being on Ordinal and being a lit RPG protagonist or going on a beer cruise, he would have definitely gone on the booze cruise. Not even a question.
I think that's true of most of us at this point.
Mm-hmm.
I'm turning 30 next month, and I just definitely want to relax and not be in grad school anymore.
No, that sounds like fun.
So another thing that sets him apart is his companions. So it's not unusual for lit RPG characters to have companions, but Badgelor and Shart are amazing in their own rights. And they're both somewhat morally ambiguous. So how do you keep them likable while also making them kind of awful?
Make them snarky. Very, very snarky. Badgelor is my wife's snide commentary to me. And I won't even admit to writing all of it half the time. It is just listening to what she says to me and putting it on the page. Badgelor is my anthropomorphism, and my humanization of my cat. Basically, anytime I looked at, well, he's a combination of a couple things. Played a lot of Dungeons & Dragons, a lot of Pathfinder. If people remember Pathfinder, it was a branch off of Dungeons & Dragons 3.5. Well, there were some feats you could take that would turn your ranger's pet badger into a badger with a pet ranger that would go around with him. So that is the introduction of Badgelor. Badgelor was first that, and I had a whole voice for him, and he was just running around. And he was a little, you would definitely recognize him from my Dungeons & Dragons days, or Pathfinder days in this case. So I brought Bachelor along from that, and I've basically stuffed all of the fun bits of Dungeons and Dragons experience into him. So he comes off as a very interesting character, so to speak.
Shart is also pretty amazing too, because he's really this big bad demon who gets immediately shrunk down into this pint-sized little annoying rabid jerk.
Yes. He's very upset about life. But the other part about Shart that I think is funny is Shart operates on a 200-to-1 timescale. So he's not only stuck on Ordinal, where he has no power, no abilities, no nothing. He's a very, very small, weak little creature. Also, a day on Earth is like, half a year to him. Or an Ordinal is half a year to him. And he's been there for weeks. So he's just sitting there out of his mind bored, totally locked off from all of his power, just sitting there miserable 24/7, 365. And that's why he's quite a bit more snarky than otherwise. But yes, I love the concept. He's one of the two most powerful beings in that universe, and he is currently chibi-sized, about volleyball-sized on Jim's shoulder.
Not to mention how he gets that way with like being stuck antler first or horn first into a tree. That would
almighty
just cause anybody to be angry.
Yes. That was one of my, that I can't even quote the line because it is a four-letter word, but yes, that is one of everyone's favorite lines in all of my books is Shart's opinions on rocks.
So how do you stay consistent with the characters and and their arc throughout the books? Because Jim himself is leveling up very quickly.
Well, so for the first 4 books, I have Jim leveling up very quickly, and the trick is Jim's personality is more or less set, and then the leveling factors in on top of that. So he does have an arc. There's definite progress towards the story. I don't like stagnant stories where Jim's just leveling up to level up. Jim always has a goal in mind that he's progressing towards. Even though he may not necessarily originally know what the goal is, he definitely, at the beginning of the end of the story, there's a definite change because of Jim's actions. So that's, so essentially that's what I do with all the characters. Bachelor has a personality. He has a goal. The goal has always been to kill Charles. That's he wakes up thinking about killing Charles. There's always any day that ends in Y is a good day to kill Charles. He wants to put Charles in his belly. And so anything I do is factored through that. And he's not really developing so much as a character yet because he's got a very solid life goal, and he's been striving towards that for his whole life. And Shart's got a similar goal. He wants to defeat the Dark Overlord because he doesn't want the world to get destroyed, because that's kind of his whole thing. He has to have a world. He likes to inspire chaos upon the world and suffering, but he needs a world to inspire the chaos and suffering upon.
Do you plot out their like major story arcs as your narrative, or do you just kind of go with, here's what their motivation is, and we're just going to throw them into some stuff?
A combination of the two. Do I have every little nitpick detail put out? No. I do definitely write and let the characters develop, but like the scene and the end of book 4 was one of the first scenes I envisioned when I came up with this way back in Mayor. Like when I was writing my notes down for Mayor, the final battle in that book was pretty much exactly how I had it played out. I also have the ending of book 8 totally played out. I have the ending of book 7 totally played out. I have the ending of book 13 totally played out. But, like Castle, I knew what was going to happen. I knew that there was going to be a castle at the end of it. The specifics within that of how that occurred was a little bit more nebulous.
Okay. Does that mean then that you, like, the series is indefinite, or that it doesn't really have an end yet?
If sales keep up, it is going to be a 13-book series.
Oh, okay.
If it does not keep up, I can have it wrapped up in 3 books if I absolutely have to. However, sales are very solid right now.
Yeah, I think you're fine.
Yeah. No, but there is definitely an ending. It's an actual good climactic final battle for the fate of the world and all that stuff. So
Okay.
it'll be something to read.
So I love that stories can go, that like lit RPG can go on forever, but I also like endings. So this is good to hear. There's something to look forward to.
Yeah, I don't. A story that just goes on for the sake of story is not interesting to me. You know, there's some advantages to it, but you know, I would rather move on to the next greatest thing after I've read for such a period of time. And honestly, after I write the first 13 books, I think I'm going to be done with the setting. But if I want to get back into it, there's several anthology ideas I've been tossing around, or potentially, I might rewrite some of the first books to get them a little bit higher standards because my editing process wasn't super duper solid early on. It got a lot better.
Do you have an outside editor right now?
My wife has an English degree, so I let her do the editing. My current writing process is a combination of Scriberly to get the book written up. All my notes are in Scriberly. Then I push it over to Word, and I use Grammarly to catch the really, really bad stuff. And I tend to the more interesting the scene, the quicker I write. The quicker I write, the worse it gets, and it gets very worse. The worsest even. As an author, I could use those words. Moving on. No, it gets progressively worse as I write, and as that happens, I have to go through, and my first drafts are terrible. Jim's not even funny in the first drafts. I write a very straight first draft. You know, there's lines in my books like Bachelor says something funny here, or Shart is snarky, and then I just move on because I'm not in the headspace to properly sit down there and write dialogue.
How do you go back in and add that funniness? Do you just talk to your wife and she's like, you know what's really funny? A break wind spell.
Oh, no, that was all me. That was all me. A chapter-long fart joke is mwah. A chapter-long fart joke with an extremely detailed discussion of both magical theory and how magic functions on Ordinal was just that was one of my favorite chapters. Another chapter I had that was really good was for Jonathan. That was for my audiobook readers, because a lot of my manual book readers is like, I don't quite get this. Why is he making? But I mentioned that there's, you know, for you go to see a 3D movie, or you see a movie that also has a 3D option. When you see the movie, there's always that one scene where the ping pong ball is going in and out of frame or something like that. Just show off the 3D. Well, I have an audiobook, so I decided I'd make an audiobook chapter just to see how it goes. And Jonathan apparently was real fond of that chapter because it is nothing but tongue twisters to try to get past a trap. And out of all different characters, talking in higher and lower registers, it was great, and I loved it.
I love that he released the like the like outtake, right?
Oh, yes.
And it just is fuck Rimmel. It's just in the middle.
I've been cursed by name by someone who's on television. I think that was one of my life goals.
I thought it was really wonderful, and it just kind of like made the whole narration process even funnier for me. Because I just imagine him sitting in a dark room being like, God, ah.
He went to Juilliard, so, you know.
So I really love Jonathan McLean's narration style. And it sounds like did you always have the books to be planned to be narrated? I can't talk today.
Oh, no worries. Actually, no. So when I originally came up with Mayor, I was hoping that it might crack $1,000 worth of sales. Maybe. If I'm lucky, it might make, 1,500. Especially with the cover I first released it on, it was pretty obvious that I wasn't expecting it to do very well. And it did very, very well. At which point I was approached by just about everybody to do an audiobook. I was rather surprised. I had dozens of emails from sources saying, hey, would you like to do an audiobook? I finally agreed with Podium, because I'd had a lot of books that were read by Podium, or that I've listened to a lot of books that have been read by Podium. And I decided that they were going to treat me well after I talked to some other author friends. And so I signed up with them, and they picked Jonathan McLean after hearing everything, and they've done very well by me.
Were you involved in the initial, like, getting set up with the narration style, or?
No, see, back then I was a very new author releasing a very special book, and Victoria, who is my contact over there, she went through and they figured out Jonathan would do a good job at it, and Jonathan did an excellent job at it, and then it just went up from there. I think it did much better on Audible than they thought it would, because I think they were hoping it would do, they were hoping it'd make like $1,000, bigger numbers, and it did way better than that. So at that point, Jonathan started getting back in with them and being like, "Hey, when's book 2 going to come out?"
So you mentioned earlier before the interview started that you still have a day job.
Oh yeah.
So why do you keep a day job instead of trying to transition to full-time writer?
Because I have small children. Actually, I have a family, and I make a decent amount of money doing this, but it's not like I'm not sitting here in a giant heaping pile of money yet. Give me 5 years of doing this and I'll be able to manage it. But right now, economically, it does not make sense for me to quit. I think we decided 6 to 8 books is going to be the magic number. But my boss was also like, well, you could stay. And so I like my job. I work, I'm not going to discuss that, but I do enjoy my job quite thoroughly. They treat me very well. So it'd kind of be a jerk move to leave them like that. So I still work there, and I will work there for at least another year or two.
Okay, that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
And it also brings up the idea of, like, how do you manage writing time, family time, and then work time? Especially right now when I imagine you're stuck at home like everybody else.
I would use the term poorly. No, I tend to, I work from, pretty much 8 o'clock in the morning to about 5 o'clock at night, 4 o'clock some days, 4:20 other days when I mess up on that. And then, I have my youngest son is 11. Oh gosh, no, is he 13? He's 13. 13, 15, and 20 are my kids' ages, so they don't require a lot of support at this point. Matter of fact, I'd love to spend more time with them, but they are not inclined to spend more time with me. So that being said, I have plenty of time there. My wife and I do spend quite a bit of time with each other, but she also spends a lot of time working on the book, as do I. So there's a lot of stuff to talk about. But I only end up writing, on average, I only write about 2 hours a night, but I blast through those 2 hours. I can usually hit between 2 and 4,000 words a day with 2 hours worth of writing.
You mentioned that you completed the first book in about 30 days. Was that
Oh, yeah.
the same kind of schedule, or were you more intense then?
Back then, I was in a spot where mentally, where I just felt I could really devote myself to writing a bunch, and I did. Emotionally, I was in the spot where I needed a very solid distraction, and I also wanted to finish a book because I was feeling unachieved in my life. So I figured I would extol the virtues of Jim and see how well that worked.
I would say it worked pretty well.
I've heard once or twice.
So you started as you're self-published, correct?
Yes, still.
Okay, so have you been asked to join any publishing houses, like you were asked, hey, let's get your book as an Audible book?
Strangely, no. I think I had been talking to some friends about certain events, and I think if the Dragon Con hadn't been canceled, I certainly would have been approached by someone there, as I was planning on attending. But I have not yet been approached by anyone. But they'd have to give me a pretty good offer because right now I get 100% all the money. Well, 70% of all the money, but still, that's 100% of 70%, which is better than another number.
That's fair. Do you feel like things being shut down, like Dragon Con, has impacted how you would have been able to sell the books?
Um, yes and no. I think it's closed some avenues off, but my sale, but also there's a lot of people at home. They're looking for stuff to do. They like to read books, and my sales numbers are pretty solid. I'm definitely making a very good amount of money doing this. But again, I'm releasing a new book every 6 months or less. This is actually the longest time it's been between books, I think, and it's going to be. I'm thinking I was hoping 5 months, but it's looking like January now. And every time I release a new book, my numbers all fluctuate all over the place. So, in short, yes, it has changed the numbers. I don't have enough information to really determine how good or bad that is.
That's fair. When you first started, how did you get the word out that you had a book and that you wanted people to read it?
I posted in every Facebook group I could find, and also Lit RPG on Reddit. The Facebook groups were reasonably, nice to me. Lit RPG on Reddit suggested that I learn to write and was very, very impolite. They have gotten nicer as I have released more books and had an improved editing process.
Yeah, okay. That sounds like the internet.
Yeah, it does. But I was actually surprised. Yeah, the community on Facebook is actually pretty solid. So if you hit like 3 or 4 of those groups, you're going to do pretty well. Then there's also just word of mouth has been very good for my series. A lot of people have told me they've recommended my books because I don't advertise particularly well. And finally, I have been approached by Amazon. Like, I do really good sales in Australia for no apparent reason. So I was approached by Amazon to have a featured book in Australia recently, and that boosted my sales somewhat of upside down loony money. I don't know what they I assume they pay with like shark teeth and koalas or something like that.
I hope not. Koalas are dirty. They're just dirty animals.
Yes, evil little drop bears. Moving on.
um, has the Audible return policy impacted you at all as a writer?
So as I work through Podium, I do not get any useful information. I get a nice sales report that says how many books I sold and how much money I've made, which I very much enjoy. And they might show me the return policy. Quite honestly, I haven't gotten my last supplements, or I only get a notification every 3 months about the status of it. I do get some minimal updates through there, but it's generally, it's doing good, it's not doing good. So I'm not 100% sure how the return policy is going to affect me. Generally speaking, my observation on returns is if a person can return a book, they are more likely to purchase a book, and then so you might sell 5 copies that you wouldn't have sold, and one of those persons might have returned it. So we'll see how it works. I don't know what Podium's official stance on it yet, and I'm sure they'll tell me eventually.
I'm sure as it becomes more and more of an issue for a lot of writers, it'll become more talked about too, or at least be more mainstream.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk to you about Grebthar Day. So tell me, how did you come up with Grebthar Day?
Well, Grebthar Day was a combination of Halloween and Christmas. And I had been mentioning Grebthar Day, several books, and I decided I had to include it in book 4, or I would not be true to the characters. And honestly, I think I should have spent more time building up a subplot around that to make it a little bit more exciting. But I have 2 groups of audience. Which is my problem with the books. I have a group of audience who absolutely adores all of my characters and just wants to read about my characters and does not care about any of the action, plot, or even lit RPG elements. I have a second group of readers who really like the action, the plot, the RPG elements, and find all of my characters very grating and assholey. And now there is a nice little Venn diagram where those 2 groups meet, and there's a lot of overlap, but there is a substantial not overlap as well. So the Grebthar Day was a big celebration for the first half because I felt like writing a lot of dialogue, and punishing Jim because punishing Jim is the cornerstone of that series.
It does seem like that's your main focus for him. It's just punishment for no reason. He seems like a
Yeah.
perfectly nice guy.
Yeah, no, no. So I have been game mastering since I was about 13 years old. I am currently 43. So I have 30-year-old game master, and my best friend in the whole world, Mose, would quickly inform you that my main strategy is torturing his characters throughout the entire adventure. And I would say he is absolutely correct, because that is what I enjoy most. So Jim is every horrible thing I've done to one of my friend Moses' characters over the many years, including many, many, many crotch injuries. So many.
It, so you can definitely tell when you're reading, well, in my case, listening
Hmm.
to Noobtown, that you played a lot of D&D, or that you are very, very familiar with dungeon masters, because the way everything kind of folds out, it makes a logical sense, and like a sometimes illogical world.
Yes.
So it feels like you've done this quite a bit.
Oh yeah, I've been dungeon. I'm actually dungeon mastering 2 campaigns right now. I'm running a 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons game, which is the what is it? Did I move that book? I moved the book. Rise of the Dragon Queen, which is the updated version of Rise of Tiamat and Horde of the Dragon Queen. And I'm just doing that with, like, when we first played that one, we had the player's handbook. I didn't have the Dungeon Master's Guide yet, and I had that book. So I played with that. So it was fun, because the first half of the campaign, we didn't have anything to spend money on. So it's like, okay, I got the DMG, and I normally don't let you buy magic items, but we're going to go crazy. How much gold do you guys have? I have 70,000 gold pieces. I made a mistake. But so we've been playing that, and we've been doing Star Wars, which is a narrative game. Star Wars Fantasy Flight games, like that one, very interesting. Got an interesting dice mechanic there. And one of the things you learn as a dungeon master, especially if you're doing Field of the Mind, or Theater of the Mind, excuse me, is you got to tell everyone where they are, where the bad guys are, what the scenario around them is. You need to leave enough vague so that they can kind of imagine themselves in the situation, but they also need to know there's a table over there, and there's a fruit cart, and there's always a fruit cart, and there's the bad guys are coming in from the south, you guys are at the north, and so everyone has a good mental picture. So if they all have the same mental picture, that makes the action more easy to understand for every single person there. So that's what I generally try to do when I'm writing my fight scenes out.
They seem to work really well, because I do have that like, hey, there is that thing right over there, and I like, oh, maybe they're going to use it. Oh, and it broke. Or someone got smashed into it, of course, or it's on fire now.
Yes.
So I think that is just really helpful, like, knowing that people need that in games in real life is really helpful in your writing.
Yep.
So, good
I
job.
try.
Are you working on any new series now?
So how do I put this? As an author of a somewhat successful book who has no other books in my cabinet, I am only going to write Noobtown until Noobtown peters out. So I have a commitment to my fans that that's how I'm going to do it, and that's what I'm going to do, because what I don't want to do is spend my creative talents on 2 different properties and then take an extra, I don't want to wait an extra 6 months to release my next Noobtown book, because I'm releasing a book that may or may not do very well. Or may or may not be what my audience is looking for. They're looking for more Noobtown. I'm going to give them more Noobtown. Now, if Noobtown starts to slow down, I might reevaluate this, because I have several good science fiction ideas that I'm going to write next. And I'm not going to discuss those because they're brilliant and such, but I've got several science fiction ideas that I'm going to be looking at after I'm finished up with Noobtown, but that would still not be for multiple years, and I'll probably have changed my mind by then. But I do have some ideas for books that I was going to write, and I might just do a palate cleanser and just write a one-off book, just to have a one-off book that I have written. But the problem is I tend to write stories that tend to expand. So if I write a one-off book, it very likely will end up being another series, and then I'll have to do a second series, which I want to do, but I also don't want to do now.
I'm really excited to see what you could do with a sci-fi setting and a sci-fi series. I'd be down for that. So finish Noobtown so you can do that one.
Yeah, if I get enough books to actually be able to quit my day job, yeah, that would vastly accelerate my workflow.
All right, everybody listening, you have to go buy Ryan Rimmel's books. It's just how it's got to be. Well, thank you, Ryan, for joining me.
Oh, no problem.
And thank you for listening. If you haven't read Ryan Rimmel's Noobtown series yet, get it, read it, and celebrate Grebthar Day. Have a great day.
Have a good day.